Dr. Madden is going to be joining us in just a minute, and we're going to be talking a little bit about infant nutrition and formula today. Hey, how are you?
Hi, how are you doing? I can't see you yet, but I can hear you.
Okay, I can see both of our cameras, so
Okay, good. Yep,
um,
still loading up.
okay,
I can hear you great. Okay, there we go.
all right, wonderful.
Hi.
Thanks, Dr. Madden.
Yeah.
So I'll introduce you really quick, and then if you want to kind of jump into what you're planning to talk about, that would be perfect.
Okay,
So
absolutely.
wonderful. So, Dr. Madden is a pediatrician who does newborn visits at home, and she's also an infant feeding specialist in IBCLC. And she's joining us today to talk to us a little bit more about formula, because sometimes you may need to supplement, and sometimes you may not be able to breastfeed, and that's okay. If that happens, because we have good options for you. So I'm going to go ahead and let Dr. Madden get started. If anyone has questions, please
Mhm.
feel free to type them in the comment section and we'll get to them as we can.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity. I wanted to start off, I am pretty much an open book, and anybody can ask me anything at any time. Full disclosure, I am a mom of four, and my kids are all, I know you're like in the thick of like little babies and toddler. Mine are big now. So my youngest just turned 9, and my oldest is almost 16. And my story is such that I was a pediatric resident when I had my oldest. And I obviously, I mean, I had babysat. I had so much experience with kids. I had rounded in newborn nurseries, like helping to guide mothers with breastfeeding. So I might have been a little arrogant, but I was like, I can do this. Like, I am going to breastfeed and it's going to go just fine. Okay. And this is back before social media. And, it's so different now, but our resources available for all of that. It was like books. You talk to your pediatrician, you read like that, what to expect. Like those, we read books because there wasn't much to be able to search for on the internet.
Mhm.
But fast forward, so I had Grace, my oldest, totally, she was fine. She was full term, healthy delivery, everything went well. And she would not latch. Like she just would not latch. So what
Mhm.
we ended up doing was we had like in-hospital lactation support using a nipple shield, and I had to pump to keep up my supply. And then she developed jaundice, which then led me to have to start to supplement, but I didn't have enough pumped milk to supplement. So I
Mhm.
started her on formula. And I can't remember what you gave her. It was probably just, regular typical formula, which led her to start to projectile vomit. Like she really was not. So this is what I'll get to later on. There's different, a lot of people have questions like, how do I know if my baby's reacting to formula? Either spitting up, is this normal or not? And I'll get to it later, but for Grace, it literally shot across the room like projectile. And that's typically not normal. That's not like normal spit up or reflux is when it comes out. But anyway, so I was really under pressure then. Oh my gosh, she's reacting to formula. Let me really beef up my pumping. And we triple pumped for 2 months. And
Mhm.
I think probably, I know you're familiar with what triple pumping is. And I know probably a lot of people who will ultimately watch this or are watching right now does. But it's your cycle of trying to get your baby to breastfeed, then giving them either pumped breast milk or formula by bottle. And then you have to empty your breast and pump after, right? If the baby wasn't effectively emptying.
Mhm.
She started to react to every supplemental formula that we gave her. We put her on special formula. She was diagnosed with a milk protein allergy. And ultimately, she ended up on Neocate, which is a 100% amino acid based formula. And she did beautifully. So my oldest was formula fed. She got breast milk for 2 months,
Mhm.
despite me going into everything knowing breast milk is best, just thinking that I could do it because of all of my experience.
Mhm.
My second, it was similar. He actually latched on and it was okay. But I was in the middle of my neonatology fellowship when I had him.
Mhm.
And the life of a neonatologist, we like go all day and all night to any high risk delivery. Like we can't predict when a preemie is going to be born. So for
Mhm.
me, to be gone for him for 24-hour shifts, I was pumping, to continue my milk supply. And he I couldn't do it. Like I remember one night I had just hooked myself up to the pump in a pumping room. I maybe had a half ounce and I got called to a high risk delivery of a small preemie. And then for 3 or 4 hours, I was stabilizing that preemie. You know what I mean? So by the time I got to pumping again, so I just watched it dwindle. And he got formula too, from about 4 months on. And so in my third and fourth, I guess I'm trying to explain that breastfeeding, that what it happens isn't always what you expect. And it's not your fault. There's so many different factors that can come into play. My third and fourth, my expectations were like super low after having Grace and Tommy. I was like, okay, whatever. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, and it worked out great for both of them, just ironically. So my youngest two, that I really did nothing differently. Like I was able to nurse, and they got supplemented when they were like 8 or 9 months. The reality is, though, the vast majority of us who are breastfeeding do end up needing to use formula. And so what I've started to do is work with moms a lot on this, because I found it's really hard to get quality information. There are tons of, internet sites and searches, and they are funded by formula companies, which is kind of, you know what I mean? It's biased. And then there's other like super well-intentioned other entities and like social media groups where the party line is all formulas are the same. Breast is best. And that's not true either. So what I've tried to do is take an approach and working with moms and, and being able to talk to people like we're doing right now. Just the vast majority of babies who are exclusively breastfed will end up, by the time they're 12 months old, getting some formula. Okay. I mean, I think the stats are like 80% or so. And that it's something that you do have to think about. They're not all the same. The formulas are definitely not all the same. And there's just multiple things that you need to factor in. So I shared my backstory, and that's kind of where I was going. Do you have any questions at all about anything I've said so far?
I don't think so. It's interesting though, because I had a very similar experience. I don't have four, I have two right now, but our first baby, I had a hemorrhage, and then I didn't have a milk supply basically because I had retained placenta, which makes it so you can't produce milk yet. And then I remember I just gave whatever formula the lactation consultant gave me to the baby without really understanding it. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you about that today, because I feel like a lot of moms may be in that situation, or they may get to a point with their jobs or what they're doing where they can't fully breastfeed, and they may need to supplement. And I feel like it's so important to be knowledgeable and have information on that. And so I really appreciate you talking to us. And it was funny that you said with your third and fourth, you were kind of like, I give up, whatever happens, happens.
Yeah.
That's what I do with our second. I even told my husband, look, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm not going to do the craziness we did the first time again. And then he was fine, he was fine with nursing. He had a soy protein allergy, but we were able to work on that. But, as far as the actual nursing went, he did fine. And so it's interesting that, I went into it as well. I was like, oh, well, I've done OB, I've done newborn nursery in my training, I should be able to figure this out. And it's not quite that straightforward when you begin nursing. And then it definitely isn't straightforward if there are complications and you need to supplement or you are unable to breastfeed or something. So I really appreciate you coming on today. And I'd love for you to jump into kind of what, your content was going to be regarding the formula.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is just to tease out like just the formula basics. So most of the formulas that are and I'm going to be discussing today the FDA approved formulas that are for sale in the US. We can talk a little bit after that about European formulas, but I really wanted to focus on, what you can get here at Target or Walmart or Costco. Most of the formulas are milk protein based, cow's milk protein based. And that's going to be one of your very first ingredients in the formula. Now, where it gets a little confusing, we've got the three main formula makers in the US. Correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's Gerber, Similac, and Enfamil. Okay. And if you go, I'm just going to use Target because that's where I most often am doing my shopping. So you go to the aisle, you see all of these different like Similac Advanced, Similac Pro Advanced, Enfamil Sensitive, Enfamil Neuro Pro Sensitive, and Gentilese and Neuro, and it's I get overwhelmed because I'm like, well, what exactly is the difference between all of these? Okay. And then you have the generic brands. Target has their own brand Up and Up where it's similar. There's like gentle, sensitive, soy. So for the milk protein based formulas, the first thing I want to make sure everybody knows is that if you took Gerber Enfamil Similac and then you took Target's regular standard milk based formula, it is exactly the same. Okay. There's a company, and I'm not funded. I have no financial relationship to any of these companies, just so you know it. But it's called Perrigo, Perrigo. They make 55 different generic formulas for like every major retail outlet in the US. So like Amazon has Mama Bear brand, or Walmart has Parent Choice, and Target has Up and Up. It can be used interchangeably. It is exactly the same. And these generic brands are going to say on their actual container, this is comparable to Enfamil blank, or this is comparable to Similac blank or Gerber. So it's kind of there for you, but it's not apparent on first glance when you're looking at the shelves, you know, like which ones are the same. So most babies actually just a normal milk-based formula, depending on the brand, it might have something like 2-FL-HMO. That's a prebiotic that's added in. Or it might have like a little fancy, we contain MFGM. That's milk fat globule membrane. That's just what another maker adds in kind of as a little fancy designer ingredient. Those things right now, as far as where I come from, those things don't matter. Okay, like it includes these little bits, or maybe probiotics versus this prebiotic. Okay, so what I typically recommend is, you know, do your price per ounce calculator, which there actually is this app that does it beautifully, and I never knew. It's free. I have no idea who made it, but it's available for download. And you can plug in any canister of formula that you're considering, and you put in the ounces in the container, and it gives you a price per ounce, which is super helpful because you otherwise never really see it broken down for prepared ounces of formula. And when you look at it that way, it can really help you to gauge, okay, well, what is the difference between Gerber and Enfamil and Mama Bear or Up and Up? And for the exact same formula, it's a difference of like sometimes 8 to 10 cents per ounce. And if you look at like by the time a baby is fully formula feeding, that they're feeding 24, 28, 30 ounces a day, that really adds up too. So it's nice that what I like it. And again, I can't remember what the app is called, but if you search for it, you'll find it. It makes it really easy to do the math just to kind of price compare. And then every major formula maker and the generics, they have different ones for different digestive symptoms or sensitivities. Okay. And so the two main, and I'm generalizing, you'll see formulas that are tagged as being gentle ease, like a gentle formulation or a gentle ease. Typically, those are still milk-based formulas, and they have the milk protein is partially hydrolyzed. So the protein chain is broken up into smaller pieces, and it can be easier to digest for certain babies. Okay. It is not like you said your baby had a milk soy protein allergy. So did Grace, my oldest. These partially broken down gentlese or gentle formulas, babies like ours who have a real bona fide, they're going to react really badly to these formulas. And I've seen a lot of misinformation out there because what babies like ours need with a real milk protein is a extensively hydrolyzed formula. And these are partially hydrolyzed, but there's a lot of mistake, you know what I mean, and confusion between the two. That's one thing to bear in mind. And then all of the major formula makers, so they have their gentlese, gentle, or whatever you want to call it, with a partially broken down. It could be if there's a degree of sensitivity, it won't hurt to try it, but if your babe's got a real allergy, it's not going to work. And then they have the sensitive brands. So you'll see like Gerber, whatever, sensitive. Those are low lactose formulations. So that would be if there's any type of suspected lactose intolerance, which in babies is actually really rare. But you have those two. And then they have, all of them now have combined sensitivity formulas that are both partially hydrated. It takes like the Gentilese and the sensitive together into like this
Mhm.
extra sensitive formulation. And they're both low lactose and partially hydrolyzed, and they're a lot more expensive. And again, those formulas, from a standpoint of just newborn medicine and neonatology, I cannot tell you that they really are any better. Okay. Will it hurt to try them? I don't think so. It's something I would discuss with your pediatrician, if you're going to go from kind of the standard milk protein base to one of the specialty ones. But
Mhm.
to bear in mind, they're really expensive. Okay. And not necessarily sure that there's that much bang for the buck. But is it worth a
Mhm.
try? Yes. Now, if you're dealing with your baby is having like true concerning digestive symptoms, in my case, like I said, Grace had those real true projectile vomiting. She also
Mhm.
developed mucousy bloody poops. I don't know what were your baby's symptoms?
So he had a really severe proctocolitis, but he didn't
Okay.
develop a mucus, but he didn't have blood. And then he would also projectile vomit.
Vomit
So,
too.
yeah. And I mean, if there was any soy in my diet at all, like if I ate a piece of chocolate with soy lecithin in it, he was
Just
like projectile vomiting for the
vomiting.
next couple of feeds. Yeah. So, I
Yeah.
mean, that
And
was the biggest thing for him.
yes, and I've seen that so many times with moms. It's just like one little, you know what I mean? Tiny, you're not even realizing you have any speck of soy or dairy in your diet, and the babies will react. Um, and so if you're in a situation like that, I do recommend, I know there's a lot of mamas out there that are self-diagnosing your babies with
Hmm.
this. And that's so well, right? You want to figure out what's going on with my baby. Like they've
Right.
got these, this is not normal. I've talked to
Right.
friends, something is going on. And I do encourage you, whoever it is medically that's taking care of your baby, if it's a nurse practitioner, a pediatrician, please discuss that with them too. Yeah,
Mhm.
chances are your instincts are right, right? Like
Right.
most of the time. But I do recommend any major formula change like that, that you do talk it over
Mhm.
too. So babies who have symptoms, like we were saying, projectile vomiting, you could see bloody stools, proctocolitis, they cannot have the milk-based formulas like the ones I've talked about thus
Mhm.
far. And they also, in about 2/3 of cases, they're going to react to soy protein too. So you take that
Mhm.
category of soy protein formulas, and you can't use those either. And so you need to use not the partially hydrolyzed formula, but
Mhm.
extensively hydrolyzed formula. And right now there's 4 or 5 on the market. The two most common
Mhm.
are Nutramigen and Alimentum. And they're also Gerber now has one, and I do my best to keep track. I think it's called Gerber HA, but it's
Mhm.
extensively hydrolyzed also. The generic, as far as I know, the ones I talked about, like all these 55 generic formulas, they do not have one that's safe for real cow's milk protein allergies, just as an FYI. So anything, if you're confused and you're looking like it's got labeling for babies with sensitivity or, babies with gassy, fussiness, colic,
Mhm.
but it's one of the generic ones, that is not going to be one that can be used. Okay. Soy formulas. So you've got this next category of soy formulas out there. Again, all of the major formula makers make a soy formula that really, from a standpoint of growth and newborn development, you can
Mhm.
use that interchangeably with a milk-based formula. The only caveat that I can think of that's actually really rooted in research and evidence-based is that the soy formulas are not acceptable for premature babies. And so if you have a preemie who's born before 37, 36 weeks, something
Mhm.
about it can interfere with like bone mineralization and development of the
Mhm.
bones and bone strength, specifically in preemies. So I always advise parents of preemies to not use the soy formulas. Um, I don't have evidence yet. There's a lot of concerns about potential effects on reproduction, you know what I mean, and hormonal
Mhm.
effects with giving your
Right.
baby soy formula during the first year of life. And I
Mhm.
think that theoretically, I understand where the concern comes from, and we unfortunately don't have long-term scientific evidence either way.
Mhm.
Does that matter? I don't know if you've came across anything. I haven't. Everything I've seen has been very like theoretical about that.
Right. Yeah, I haven't seen any evidence on that. We know that soy is estrogenic, and so
Yeah.
it could potentially have an effect. But if that's what's working for your baby, I don't think we have any evidence saying it's
Yeah,
definitely going to cause something, you know?
exactly. Exactly. And so there's that category of formula too. So there's other formulas you'll come across like Enfamil AR. That just has
Hmm.
added rice starch to it. And so
Okay.
for a subset of babies that have reflux, esophageal reflux, where it's recommended that babies get thickened feeds by their
Hmm.
pediatrician or their speech pathologist or occupational therapist, some babies will have some improvement with Enfamil AR, and that is available on the shelves at most stores. And that's probably not one where I would go to it. You know what I mean? Just pick it. Like if my
Hmm.
baby's spinning up a lot, I think that's one that would be best to talk to a doctor
Right.
about
Right.
before making that change. And then we get into really the real expensive specialized formulas.
Hmm.
So if you have a baby who has any type of really, really severe, significant milk soy
Hmm.
protein allergy, there are formulas that have no protein. They're not extensively
Hmm.
hydrolyzed. They're actually just amino acid based. So they
Hmm.
have the building blocks of protein, amino acids. So babies are getting nutritionally the same nutrition that they would from protein,
Hmm.
but there's no protein.
Right.
And the main ones in the US right now are Neocate, Elecare, Pure Amino, um, Alpha Amino, which is Nestle, and Gerber. If they don't have one yet, they might be bringing one to the market pretty soon. Okay. These are in most places, they're by prescription only. And you're looking at cost per ounce being approximately double, like a regular
Hmm.
formula, like
Hmm.
closer to 50 cents per ounce or so, depending on which one. Some states, if your baby's diagnosed and needs it, fortunately, insurances will cover the cost. But in
Okay.
other states, it's out of pocket too. Um,
Wow.
and so other babies that would end up needing formulas like that, like in these amino acid base, would be if you had a baby that had a history of some type of intestinal issues, like needing surgery on the
Hmm.
intestines, a former preemie that had had a bowel infection,
Hmm.
and other things like that too. So those are kind of the main category of formulas that are out there. I'm not sure if that made sense or not.
Yeah, I think it did. I think that's
Okay.
helpful to kind of break it down. And I really like that you mentioned that these are all kind of made by the same company. So there's not a huge difference other than the names on the bottles for most of these things. But is that
Yeah.
true for the specialized ones as well, like the Gentlease and that kind of thing? Do all the companies have a similar product for those?
Yeah, so when we look at the ones that are made with cow's milk protein infant
Hmm.
formulas that are either low lactose or partially hydrolyzed, these sensitive and gentle, they can all be
Hmm.
used interchangeably. And when you look at the generic makers of like the 55 that are all made by the same company,
Hmm.
each one that's marked as like gentle or sensitive is exactly the same and can be used interchangeably. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
great. Thank you.
Um, yeah, and so in working with a lot of moms especially over the last year, like trying to choose a supplemental formula
Hmm.
or troubleshoot whether or not their baby's reacting to a formula,
Hmm.
um, the thing that can get really confusing, and I think you'll have insight because you work with so many moms and babies too, is there is a period of time that almost all new babies are cranky and gassy and they fart and they seem uncomfortable. Like it's kind
Right.
of it's around like 3, 4, 5,
Hmm.
6 weeks. They cry more too. And I'm not talking about colic crying, but there's like witching, crabby hour in the evening.
Right. Yeah.
So I've worked with a lot of families. They're kind of like they come to me and the babes are about 6 months old, and they'll be
Hmm.
like, Dr. Madden, like, we started on Similac Advance, and then we tried, I don't know, Infamil Gentlease, and then we
Hmm.
tried Pro Sensitive, and we've tried 4 or 5 formulas, and my 6 week old baby is still like a wreck. They're still, you know what I mean, like
Right.
crabby and they're not they're within that normal newborn. I don't even know
Mhm.
what to actually call it. I've heard people call it like baby's fourth trimester. You know what I mean? Like that.
Right.
No formula is going to change that. And so a lot of the times it's just sheer coincidence that by the time the baby is naturally outgrowing this cranky, I'm its 4 to 6 week, 7 week old phase,
Right.
whatever formula they're on at that point that they've changed to is believed to
Mhm.
be that like fixed it or helped it. But it's just
Right.
really the baby just developing and growing, on
Right.
their own. And
Right.
I can see why, because it's a coincidence, but I can see why you would piece it together. So I'm not
Mhm.
at all being disparaging about it, other than that, to keep an open mind as time goes on. And really, if this is a very expensive endeavor for you, you know what I mean, paying for formula, maybe just try going back to the normal generic kind, you know what I mean, and see what
Yeah.
happens so that you're not committing yourself from the time a baby's 2 months old to 12 months old, paying
Mhm.
money for this really expensive formula that you probably don't need.
Right.
So I see
Right.
that all the time. And, we always go through, okay, let's figure out, is this really some pathology with your baby? Is your
Mhm.
baby growing well? Is your baby, what are your baby's poops like? And again, there are some babies. The other flip side is I've worked with moms and dads of babies around this age where it's actually abundantly clear at this point. They have a 6 to 8 week old baby who is screaming all the time, refusing to feed, not growing,
Mhm.
where there actually is a bona fide issue going on, where that hasn't been diagnosed or recognized yet. So, you do
Right.
have the flip side. And I think the most helpful thing is to, yes, if you instinctually think something is wrong with your baby's digestion or
Mhm.
feeding or formula tolerance, to definitely talk about it with,
Mhm.
I usually say pediatrician, family practice, whoever it is that's taking care, because they really can help you.
Mhm.
Um, I think if you get the party line of all formulas are the same from that individual, that it could be
Right.
time to go seek a second opinion, though.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think that's such a great point is, if you have a concern and it's not being addressed appropriately or, kind of a band-aid is put on it, it's fine to go seek another opinion or talk to another professional
yes,
that knows what they're doing as well. Because sometimes, I think we all have areas that we are more specialized in and more interested in. Like I really don't know much about formula and know more about breastfeeding, right? So if someone came to me
yeah,
with a formula question, I would say, maybe I'm not the best person for you to talk to about it, but sometimes people feel like they have to give you an answer, and sometimes the answer is not correct. So
it's
it's
not
okay to
correct.
talk to somebody else.
Yes, yes. I will say this much that really a conversation like this, if you have a baby who's having some feeding issues of some sort, this is not a 3 or 4 minute discussion. This
Mm-hmm.
is really, I mean, what I do is I get the most detailed, everything. Like, let's talk about the pregnancy. Let's talk about the family history. Is there anyone with digestion problems? Let's talk about everything like sleep and whatnot, because you really, if you're able to have the time, to be able to really dive deep into it, in most cases, the issue can be figured out within that time. In the long run, it saves you a lot of stress. It can save you a lot
Yeah,
of stress.
for sure.
Um, yeah, so I think that was the main kind of spiel or overview, just, in terms of just formula in general. Are there questions that you get asked often, or, anything else that your viewers might be interested in?
So I think the biggest thing, and I think you've kind of hit on this, is I wanted to have people understand what the different formula types mean, and then also
Mhm.
get an idea of what those differences in brands are, because I feel like so much of formula is driven by advertising, right? And we get all
Yes.
these messages of this is the best one. If you don't use this, it's not gonna, your baby's not gonna be okay. And that's not true. And it's interesting that you talked about the manufacturing, because if these
Yeah.
are all truly manufactured in the same place, then they're really just the same thing in different packages, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
to
so I think that
clarify,
was super helpful to hear.
yeah.
Oh, sorry.
And just to clarify that Mead Johnson's, Enfamil, and Gerber and Similac, those are different. It's when you're
Right.
dealing with these
Okay.
other 55
With the
store
generic.
brands where they
Okay.
are
Okay.
exactly the same manufacturer, but
Okay.
they can be used same ingredients and same exact
Hmm.
formulations as those like big three makers too.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Um, I get a lot of questions too, as I can bring up a call. I don't know how much time we have, if we have to end at 12:30 or not, but there were just a
It's,
couple more
it's okay.
things I wanted to bring up. that I see.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
No, that's totally fine.
Okay.
I've got until 1 o'clock, so
Oh,
you
okay.
can go as long
Sounds
as you'd
good.
like to.
Sounds good. One thing that I've became more and more aware with, just due to the cost of formula, is that I have met families, including some of my own family members, who have been mixing the formula with slightly more water to
Mm-hmm.
dilute it and to stretch out how long a canister of formula will last. And I'm
Right.
talking about formula for the most part as if it's powder that comes in a can or
Mm-hmm.
container. There are other types. There's concentrate and there's ready to feed,
Mm-hmm.
but most parents are going to be making it with powder just because of the cost. It's a lot
Right.
less expensive that way. Um,
Right.
and so all of the formulas on the market in the US, the mixing instructions are that you add 1 scoop to 2 ounces of water. But there are a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people out there that are like stretching it to 2.5 or 3 ounces.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's dangerous, because what that really can do for babies is it affects babies' electrolytes. So the more
Mm-hmm.
dilute of that they're drinking of a substance that they're drinking, they're at a much
Mm-hmm.
higher risk of developing low levels of sodium and
Right.
potassium and other electrolytes that are really essential for functioning of their entire body. And we have had
Mm-hmm.
babies admitted to the NICU in situations like this. They come in with like seizures and problems like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really recommend against it for that reason. I don't think that that's widely, I don't think people know that, because I think
Right.
if families knew that, I don't think they would do that. Like in my own family
Mm-hmm.
member that was doing this, she was like horrified when I talked to her about it. I was like, oh, hon, like you cannot do this. And, she was like, I
Mm-hmm.
had no idea that this could be harmful at all.
Right.
Um, the other thing that's really helpful is too to keep in mind, especially if you haven't used formula before and you are just starting, a couple of things. And these are tips you'll find on really reputable sites like the American Academy of Pediatrics, or
Mm-hmm.
the CDC even has formula information. Is
Mm-hmm.
really clarifying that your water source is okay. If you're going to
Mm-hmm.
use tap water, which in a lot of parts of the US is totally acceptable, it has to be tap water that's safe, for usage.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otherwise, I would recommend boiling the water still if there's questions of the quality of the water that you're going to be using. Um, you can definitely make up to 24 ounces of formula at a time in a container. You know what I mean? We used to just use
Mm-hmm.
like, I used to use just like those big giant water bottles. You know what I mean? Like the ones that were clear that are marked with ounces. But it's
Right.
helpful to always instead of putting the powder in first and then adding the water, if you put the water in first, then you're adding the exact amount of water and then you put the powder in,
Right.
that you're mixing it exactly right, so that you're not going to be dealing
Mm-hmm.
with any issues in terms of if it's too dilute or too
Mm-hmm.
concentrated too. Um, I've worked with families who have made up these large containers of formula, like for several feeds, that have
Right.
left it at room temperature and not put it in the refrigerator. And the rationale for why that they're doing this is, well, this is easy. My baby drinks room temperature formula. So if it's kind of sitting in this
Mm-hmm.
container, I can just pour it out into a bottle and I don't have to do anything
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And that's extraordinarily dangerous for the risk of
Mm-hmm.
bacterial contamination of the formula.
Right.
It's very different
Right.
with breast milk. Like when we're pumping breast milk, I don't know about you, but I feel comfortable leaving it out, you know what I mean, for a couple hours at room
Mm-hmm.
temperature, because we know the breast milk inherently has, antibacterial properties, and it's not going to
Mm-hmm.
be a risk of the bacterial contamination. The other thing I get asked a lot about too is if you're in a situation of supplementing,
Mm-hmm.
breast milk and formula, is whether or not you can mix both together in the same bottle. You can.
Mm-hmm.
There's absolutely no reason that you can't, especially if you're trying to stretch out your breast milk formula. But the thing to bear in mind is, like, what do you do in terms of that mixed feed? That's treated like a formula feed. So
Okay.
say that you have a bottle of pumped milk and you feed your baby and they only take a little bit of it and you're like, okay, they're not quite hungry yet. Let me set
Mm-hmm.
this pumped milk bottle here and maybe we'll try again in an hour and a half.
Right.
With formula, you can't do that because it's the
Right.
same thing. That's that risk of it sitting out. That entire
Mm-hmm.
feed does have to be, dumped out if the baby doesn't drink
Right.
it. And that's something to factor in and keep in mind too when you are making that decision to mix both together. And I don't know. I between the 4 babies at various points, I'm sure that I was mixing it. So I think I tried everything, you know what I mean, at some point on what to do. And I feel like I had one more thing about formula preparation that I wanted to add, and I'm totally forgetting it right now. No, don't ever microwave it. That's what it is. Microwaving it to heat it can be really unsafe because you can get just like, even if you test it on your wrist, which is what I usually would do, like I would test the warmth of it, you can get the hot spots and burn your baby's mouth. And I actually have seen that happen, unfortunately. So,
and just in general, don't microwave anything you're going to feed your infant. Don't microwave breast milk either, because when you do that, you degrade a lot of the good properties in breast milk, and the same thing, you're going to get hot spots. So what is your favorite way to reheat? Because I like to keep it in like a warm water bath and run the warm water over it.
That's what I do too. Yeah. So I think if I was having babies right now, I think I would use the cool machine, the baby breast or the breast. I don't know how you pronounce it. Yeah, I became more, and when I first saw that product, I was like, I don't think this is done. You know what I mean? Like, this isn't necessary. Like, why are families paying for this? With time, I can totally see the attraction to it. I'm a huge fan, so I would just heat water up and then just stick the bottle in and let it sit for a few minutes. You can usually get the babies to a point where they can drink it, where it's, I mean, I got to the point with my babes where even if it was pumped milk or formula from the fridge, they would just drink it cold, which is awesome.
Because that's what our oldest.
Then you wouldn't have to deal, but that's usually when they're several months old down the line. It's not like you don't do that to a little 4-week-old. Like, oh, hey, here, hon, here's your cold bottle of milk. I mean, I guess you could. But yeah, with time, I found there was absolutely no need even to heat it up at all. But always just sticking it in a warm container. That's exactly what I would do too.
Right. And personally for me, I feel like the more stuff we had, the more stuff you have to clean and the more you have to do versus sticking it in like a warm water bath. I was like, I put it in the bowl, it heated up, and then the bowl just went in the dishwasher. There wasn't this complicated mechanism to clean. So personally for me, we never bought things that, or if we got things, we half the time didn't use them because it would end up having to be cleaned, which would take more time out of this period where you don't have any extra time, right? So I think if you want to try those things, great. If you don't, it's fine. Your baby will still get nice warm formula from sitting in a warm water bath for a few minutes.
Absolutely. Yes. Kind of related to that in terms of products, how do you choose a bottle? That, right? I don't know if Mom's ever asked you about like, well, what bottle should I use? I have a really difficult time recommending a certain brand of bottles because what I found with time is that there seems to be no rhyme or reason as to which bottle which baby will prefer. I think marketers will tell you otherwise, like that their bottle, you know what I mean, is they'll give you numbers and statistics, or that their bottle's nipple is more like a breast. So if you, I do not believe that that's the case on my experience, because I've had plenty of babies, moms where I worked with, where they just use like, I'm just going to throw even flow out there. Again, I have no financial relationship with anyone, but just like the basic nipple and bottle that like we were fed with. They're fine, and they could go from breast to bottle and breast back. And then there's other babies where it's been like the only absolute bottle they can take is like a Dr. Brown's. So I usually recommend like try like one, or I wouldn't go mass crazy. Like I wouldn't go into Target and buy like 5 brands of bottles, but maybe like 1 or 2 to try out first, and chances are you'll be okay. It can get more complicated for sure. If you're dealing with having a baby that does have any significant feeding issues, like with the mechanism of feeding, like suck, or there's a problem with a palate, or maybe a tongue tie that hasn't been revised, and you're working with an occupational therapist, or then yes, definitely they typically will help to troubleshoot and find the best one. And I can't say enough how helpful it can be to refer or have your baby assessed not only by a lactation consultant and your pediatrician, but like adding in that third piece when you really are dealing with just issues with making a suck or a seal or anything like that too. So they'll help you. They typically have all the different types of bottles and the nipples and the flow rates and can help. But for
Yes.
most part, a typical bottle with a slow flow rate, like the one that's made for newborns, or it should be fine.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think the basic ones are great. And the thing is, a lot of the ones that are shaped like breasts, if you're planning to
Hmm.
breastfeed, those are usually not the best one because
Hmm.
when your baby latches on, right, they pull the nipple into their mouth and kind of have this longer
Hmm.
area to suck on. And
Right.
the ones that
Yeah.
are dome shaped, they don't get that same training with their sucking mechanism versus, your classic bottle where you kind of have this like longer, more
Yeah.
elongated shape that they can more easily shape in their mouth.
Right.
So I will say if you're planning to breastfeed or, and supplementing temporarily, or you're doing both, that
Hmm.
usually the ones that look like a boob are not the best one for your baby. It's better to go with something that it acts more like a true nipple, which is like you're saying, those kind of classic bottles with the longer nipples on them.
Yeah, or Playtex. I think the one I was thinking of was Play because that's the one that's bad. It's just that boring old
Mhm.
right baby bottle. The other thing that's nice about those is they're pretty inexpensive. So if you lose it,
Mhm.
it's not a big deal. Whereas if you
Yeah.
lose one of the designer brands, that has like this that can really add up too. Yeah.
Right, for sure, for sure.
Yeah. So I
And then if you have time, one other thing I wanted to, touch on and get your thoughts on. And I think you talked about this a little at the beginning. I feel like a lot of companies are now adding all these other things into the formula, right? And then they'll
yep.
raise the price.
Hmm.
And I've actually seen a little bit of evidence that some of those things may not help and may actually even be harmful. So
Hmm.
what is your take? Are any of those? I guess we don't have much evidence, but do you feel like any of those are worth it to pay that extra price, or do you think it's better to go with something more basic and then kind of go for what your infant needs as far as their GI symptoms go, if you need to change?
Yeah, I cannot have, I don't have a good opinion because there is not any third party research where there's
Hmm.
independent research that hasn't been funded by the formula company itself to
Hmm.
show a
Hmm.
benefit. And then the problem we run into, well, we probably could really benefit from, right? Like, I would love to
Right,
know, but there's
right,
nobody who's going to pay for that, right? Like, nobody's
right,
going to pay for it. And I've
right.
seen through time, and this is generalization again. The answer
Hmm.
is I don't know, but I'm speculating right now.
Hmm.
I have seen through the years so many different formulations of formula, like adding in this specific prebiotic or this
Right,
probiotic or
right.
this breast milk like substance or this
Hmm.
DHA and ARA, right? Like all of those
Right.
types of things just going back to just pure pediatric medicine, I don't see that there's this general trend with all of these things being added into infant formula that babies are like healthier, you know what I mean, overall,
Right.
or
Right.
smarter, you know what I mean, that there hasn't been,
Right.
because if it really worked, you should see this since so many babies get formula with all these,
Right.
wouldn't you see this population change? And again,
Right.
nobody's necessarily tracking that. I think a lot of it, frankly, if your baby really was benefiting from a probiotic, you're going to get way more bang from your buck just feeding your baby a regular formula and then giving
Hmm.
them a supplemental probiotic, like
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
certain. If you
Right.
are combination feeding, so you're giving both formula and breast milk, your baby's going to be
Hmm.
getting all of this extra stuff in your breast milk anyway, like your prebiotics and your human
Right.
milk oligosaccharides, all these things are adding into
Right.
formula. So it's kind of a
Right.
moot point. They're already getting it from your milk. There's absolutely no need, any evidence that this extra supplementation that you're paying for
Right.
is going to do anything. Again, so my
Right.
answer is I don't know for sure, but kind of my
Hmm.
instincts based on what I've seen and the trends through the years is that it
Hmm.
probably doesn't mean anything right now.
Right.
Yeah. And it's
Thank you.
confusing because it changes all the
Right.
time. Like even
Right.
I put together this huge formula database a couple months ago. And as I was doing my
Hmm.
research for that, all of a sudden I came across a brand new substance being added in. I had never heard of it ever. I was like, what
Hmm.
is this? You know what I
Right.
mean? And then I learned more. I'm like, okay, it probably is just like the next greatest thing. And in 2 years, the formulas won't have that anymore. They'll have something
Right.
else added in that's supposedly
Right.
even better. And I hate to sound disparaging about it, but I don't know. If we
Mhm.
had evidence that wasn't biased from the formula company, I feel a lot better being
Mhm.
able to talk about it. So,
Right. And
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I don't know. It's crazy to me how much money they pour into advertising, right? They put all this money into advertising to make that money back. And so a
Yeah.
lot of this when you see an ad, it's not for your benefit, it's for the company's benefit. And so I think the thing to recognize is that formula is a safe alternative if breastfeeding doesn't work out for your family. But you need to use the one that works for your baby. And I wouldn't worry so much about all the additives and other things.
Yeah.
Just really focus on what their needs are as far as the basic ingredients within that formula.
Absolutely. Yes. Oh, you reminded me of a formula. I have two formulas to mention. Can I mention quickly three more formulas? Because they're
Yeah,
not main players, but I totally forgot. Goat's milk
yeah,
formula. Can we talk about goat's milk? Okay.
yes, yes.
So right now in the US, there are no FDA approved infant goat's milk formulas. Okay. There is Cabrita USA, and they have it's advertised as a toddler formula. So
Mm-hmm,
for 12 months and older.
mm-hmm,
They do have an infant formula that's in other parts of the world. So in Europe, you can buy Cabrita infant goat's milk formula.
mm-hmm,
Here in the US, they're about 2 years away, is my understanding, from having an infant formula on the market.
mm-hmm,
I've had a ton of families ask me when they're dealing with babies who are reacting to milk and soy proteins if goat's milk formula is safe. It is not. It is not
mm-hmm,
safe. They will react to it. I have seen this firsthand. And when you actually go to Cabrita's website and you read the fine print, it specifically says, do not use if baby is allergic to milk or dairy. So that's one thing to bear in mind. There are some people who are making homemade goat's milk formulas.
mm-hmm,
I don't know if you've came across, for a while there was a really targeted advertising like on Facebook for, I can't remember the name of the company. It was like they had this goat's milk formula, like make your own, and it wasn't, they were able to bypass FDA advertising rules because it was a formula recipe, they were calling it. So they were just
mm-hmm.
sending families like a package with like 18 different ingredients to mix themselves.
Wow.
It horrified me. And the reason why
Mm-hmm,
is because when you have a baby and you're so sleep deprived as it is, we're talking about people not mixing just regular baby formula
right.
correctly. Like the margin for error when you're mixing in that many ingredients to create
Mm-hmm,
something, it's something to be very, very cautious about. And what I had seen a few
mm-hmm,
years ago, at least, these websites were very convincing that this was a safe and very healthy option for your babies.
right.
So at this point right now, definitely to use caution in terms of using a goat's milk formula.
Mm-hmm,
Do not use if your baby is allergic to milk or soy proteins because they will react. And then the other two newer formulas that have been advertised the last year or so are ELSE. It's ELSE. It's 100% plant-based formula. Um,
mm-hmm,
it's in the US being sold also as a toddler formula for 12 months plus.
okay.
And they are also in the process, they're a couple years, just like Cabrita, they're a couple years away from FDA approval to market as an infant formula in the US. And the main ingredients in it are tapioca, buckwheat, and almond. And so I have had a ton of families ask me about this option because
Mm-hmm,
they really love the option of a vegan formula that's not
mm-hmm,
soy-based, and
mm-hmm,
also for babies with severe food intolerances.
right.
Number one, I think it's extraordinarily important to talk to your pediatrician about this.
Mm-hmm,
So at this point, from a medical and pediatric standpoint, I'm not recommending using these formulas.
mm-hmm,
To be just cautious, that's all. Okay. I'm trying to, I don't know if I can tell you that both Cabrita toddler and ELSE toddler, if you dive into the nutritional, they will
mm-hmm,
meet nutritional standards to be able to feed a baby. Okay. So if you're using them, you're not harming your baby in any way, shape, or
mm-hmm,
form. Okay, but we're just kind of in this gray area or zone right now until they're fully FDA approved.
mm-hmm,
And then the last formula that's brand new on the market that I'm aware of is Bobby, Bobbie. I don't know if you've came across that one yet or
Yeah,
seen
I've seen
it.
a little bit of advertising for it. I think
Yeah,
a few people have posted about it. It's supposed to be more similar to European formula, but
exactly.
FDA
Yeah.
approved. Okay.
Yeah, and so that one is out there too. I haven't had a lot of direct feedback from families
Hmm.
I've worked with that we've used it, but the benefit definitely, it's a really good alternative. It looks like if you're
Hmm.
right now in the process of importing European formula for your baby, like
Hmm.
HIP or Holly or
Hmm.
there's so many different ones, nanny care or whatever you're using.
Right.
This actually is a US made. It's made in Vermont using similar formulas to the European form, similar
Hmm.
recipes to the European formula, but it is FDA approved and has went through all the regulatory channels. So that one too. So I'm not recommending it. I'm not recommending against it, but that's another viable option too. But that's not one that
Hmm.
you're going to find at the regular stores too.
Okay.
Yeah, but it could be, if you're running into, especially there's supply and production issues. Like if you have your
Hmm.
baby on a European formula and then all of a sudden you can't get it
Right.
into the
Right.
US, that's something to pursue and look at. But it also
Mhm.
won't hurt just to go to the grocery store and just buy a regular formula too.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
I think that was it. I knew I was forgetting something. I think I wanted to mention those three because I get a lot of questions about those from families.
And
Yeah.
then with the European formulas, they're not FDA
Mhm.
approved, but they meet safety standards in Europe. So at least
Yeah.
they've met some safety standards. It's not the same as purchasing a homemade,
Oh my gosh,
mixture
no.
from somebody.
No, no, no. So you are not, no. So if you're using European formula, you are not harming your baby in any way, shape, or form. It comes down to US labeling laws. So the
Hmm.
FDA mandates it's like 34 different things that a canister
Hmm.
of infant formula has to have on it to be sold in the US.
Right.
So the European formulas have like all 34 things, but the way that they're labeled, not all, it might be like 30 of the 34
Hmm.
are on there. And
Okay.
the other thing to bear in mind with the European formulas is that you mix them entirely differently than US
Hmm.
formulas. So for all of our US formulas, it's 1 scoop to 2 ounces of water. For the
Hmm.
European formulas, it's 1 scoop to 1 ounce of water.
Hmm.
I
Okay.
bring this up if you're buying it from a, I guess, legitimate source. If it
Hmm.
is packaged in a different language, because a lot of them are in Dutch or German, they should
Right.
be providing you with very clear-cut English translated instructions
Right.
informing you that you are not mixing this the same. That
Right.
being said, there are families that are buying this and they're getting it in a foreign language, depending on the source that is not giving them these instructions, and that could lead to
Hmm.
some danger too. So the European
Right.
formulas are all mixed entirely differently than US formulas, which is really important if if you transition from a US to EU formula to know that.
Hmm. I didn't know
Yeah.
that either. And are they
Yeah.
all that way, that 1 ounce
Hmm.
to 1 scoop for all the
Yeah.
European
And
ones?
it's just,
Okay.
yeah, the ratio sometimes it's because the scoop is so much smaller. So it's a one
Mhm.
to one
Okay.
ratio. So the US formulas have like a bigger scoop, so it could be a
Hmm.
2 to 1. The European
Okay.
formulas have a smaller scoop, and that's why it's 1 to 1. So your
Okay.
dilution at the end is exactly the same, but you're dealing with just different ratios based on the scoop
Mhm.
size. Yeah. So
That's really good to know. I didn't know that.
yeah, there you go. I know I'm learning new stuff every day as I learn more and more about this world. Yeah. So I think that was it. Sorry, I keep bringing things up.
Oh, no, this has been really great and really informative. I think we don't really talk about it a lot. And like you said, so much of it is driven by advertising and information released by the people making it. Sometimes it's hard to get objective information or information from somebody who, has looked at all aspects of those different things and then kind of compiled information, which, I think this is such a great resource for families, and hopefully it will be helpful to those that may need to use formula.
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to talk about
No,
today?
that was
Okay.
it. I'm so happy to like meet you face to face.
I know, I
Really.
feel like we've talked a lot
Like, I know.
online, but
I
this was
know.
really nice. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so
Okay.
much for joining us
Sure.
today.
Okay.
And like we talked about, Dr. Madden is an infant feeding specialist. She does home visits for newborns, and then she also has Baby Gabby, which is the account she's using right now, is
Hmm.
focused on formula. So if you need a specialized consultation, I believe you can do those throughout the
Yeah.
United States,
Hmm.
correct?
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if you need to talk to somebody about the formula that you're using and you're not finding the answers you need, she's a wonderful resource. And you can also follow her account for a lot of great information. And then again, I'm in South Carolina right now. I can only see South Carolina patients once I come back from maternity leave. And then I'm planning to add Georgia at that point as well. So if anyone needs specialized lactation help in either of those states, I'm happy to help. You do need to have a pediatrician though, because telemedicine just isn't great for babies. And so I do require that you have a pediatrician that I can speak with directly so we can make sure you and your baby are taken care of. And so if you guys have any questions, feel free to add them to the comments of the video. I'll post it in a little bit, or shoot either of us a message. Anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day and a good weekend.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
you too. Bye.